a goat that we butchered, I believe, and I'm gonna double check this. See, just like new. Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. We're gonna have a kitchen day today. A little bit of cooking, a little bit of canning of meat that we produced here on our farm. This is a picnic roast from one of our Kune pigs. Because this is not labeled boar, I know this is from one of our smaller pigs. This is from one of our girls, and it weighs in at 6 pounds, which is about right for a picnic roast. Now, our pigs were about 2.5 years old, but they're still pretty sizable and definitely worth taking to the butcher. Now, this cut is a bone-in roast, and we don't have the skin on the picnic roast. Our hogs were just skinned before they were butchered, but they do have this pretty large fat pat on the top. This is very, very common for Kunes, and this is very good. I am going to trim just a little bit of it off, and I actually am going to render this down later. I'm saving up the extra pork fat in the freezer. There we go. I've left about a 1/2 inch thick pat of fat on the top of this, and this is going to make the meat self-basting, meaning that as the fat melts, it's going to drip down in through the meat, and it's going to be so good. So the recipe that I'm using says to put salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, those kind of things on the pork roast, and this is farm dust. It's like an all-purpose seasoning that has all those goodies and more in it. So I'm gonna season liberally. I do have a little bit of bone broth that I'm gonna be putting in the bottom. The pork is going to sweat its own juices, and that's gonna be great. There's a gravy that I'm gonna make to put over this later. Using those drippings, this bone broth is just gonna give it a head start. Okay, 275 degrees at about 45 to 55 minutes per pound. Uncovered. Inside this bin here, let me bring in closer, is most of a goat that we butchered last weekend. We did eat some of it, and some of this I think we are going to cut down and use for ground, like the meat that's in between the ribs. But a lot of this meat from off of the legs and the shoulders, I would like to put up in cans or in jars on the shelf. Maybe I'll grab some of that too. This here on the ribs is part of the shoulder, and then there's a really big neck roast in here too. I really like having canned meat at my disposal when I don't really have time to cook. A lot of times in summer, I don't want to heat up the house, or I just get lost outside in my projects and I run out of time to cook. Canned meat is so invaluable for instances like that. Now I'm going to be doing what's called the raw pack method of canning. It's one of my favorite methods for putting meat just away. You can load the jars straight out of the refrigerator. I will say you don't want to put super cold meat in the canner and then turn it on, because it's a little bit of a fast thermal change and sometimes the jars can break. So what we're going to do is fill these up, and then I'll go milk the goats, and then we will start the canner. There's a couple different ways that you can can your meat as far as if you want to have the bones in the jars or not. Usually with bigger animals like a goat or a deer, I'm not going to do that. I do bone in can my rabbits. But for the purposes of this goat today, I am going to debone everything. And I'm not necessarily going to chunk the pieces down at all. This is going to cook up as it cans, and goat is a lot like pork where it just sort of falls apart, and so cutting it into smaller pieces really isn't necessary. Also, I'm really not aiming to put large pieces of fat in the cans. I will save those in the freezer the same that we saved the pork fat, but a little bit of fat is not bad. Goat fat is very good. It's a lot like pork fat, at least in its texture, and it really does help add flavor and moisture to the meat. You don't really want to keep canned meat with a lot of fat on it on the shelf for very long. 18 months-ish is probably fine. The fat just risks going a little bit off if it sits longer than that, but this is not going to sit longer than that. We will consume it. Also, on goat, there are some little tendony connective bits that if we were to pan sear this, we may want to take off because those wouldn't really cook down super readily if it was like a quick cook. But these are going to can for a long time. It's a lot like pressure cooking the meat, and those little tendons and like silver skin type bits melt away in the canning process. So we don't have to worry about getting too fussy with it, which is great. So finally, I've got everything deboned and canned up. This is not the entire goat. We already had a meal. I'm trying to think of how much poundage it may have been. It was the whole back strap and saddle portion, and we still are getting 10 quarts plus a pint of meat. So I thought that that was pretty good. I do still have the bones in here. These are going to go back in the refrigerator, and I will make bone broth from those probably this weekend. I would start the bone broth right now, but because I have 10 quarts plus a pint to can, I'm going to have to use my big canner up here, my Presto, as well as my Nesco electric pressure canner to get everything done at once. And unfortunately, I can't have too many things plugged in and running on this one breaker. It's just the way our kitchen is set up, unfortunately, but it's not a problem. Checking in on our pork before I go outside. I may add a little bit of water to the bottom of the pan. It looks like it's kind of drying out on that back corner. I don't want things drying out if I can help it. Alrighty, so this big canner here, my Presto, it will fit 7 of the quarts. I do have about 2.5 inches of water in the bottom of the canner, as the directions state that we should. Now, this is not going to be like a canning tutorial. If you do need something like that, I have taken a couple canning tutorials on stuff like this, on water bath canning, and on the electric pressure canner here. I'll leave those in the description box. Get that locked and turn this up. This canner over here can fit 4 quarts. I'm going to be putting in the 3 quarts that are left over, plus this pint. Now when you're canning, pints and quarts do have different canning times, so what I'm going to want to do is can for the longest time between the 2 jars. That would be the case too if I was canning a couple different things. Like let's say I had green beans in one jar and meat in the other. Meat like this has to can for longer than green beans, and so we want to use the meat time. But I would advise against that because you can easily turn your green beans into mush. But that's not going to be the case for this. I believe, and I'm going to double check this online, I believe we need to can for 90 minutes for quarts, and so that's how long this is going to can as well, because it is in with the quarts. Yep, it says 90 minutes for quarts, so now we wait. Of course, we have a fun project to do while we wait. Yesterday we jumped ahead one day and did day 21, so we're going to back up and do day 20. What's hilarious is my sheep keep getting bigger. This is probably going to be funny. Let me see if I can get the first one out here. But look, I think this is my original one. That's the electric canner. The size difference is really funny. Okay, so the pork is done. It's been about 5 hours, and if we had skin on pork, what I would probably do is stick this under the broiler to really brown the top, but our goal for the internal temp was 180, and we are past that. Got some lovely drippings for our gravy. Thank you. So as you can see, I scraped some of the fat off. I didn't want to trim so much fat at the beginning that all the fat would render down and potentially dry out in the oven, but the Kunes have so much fat that it very easily could still be too much after cooking, which it was, so we'll save this. Now, what we have to go with is sauerkraut that was fermented by one of my friends and given to us. I guess their family isn't real big on sauerkraut. I don't know why. Putting together something a little bit acidic with something that is kind of fatty and rich, it's a really great combo. Oh, show them again. The people want to know how to sharpen a knife. What were you just doing?
Using the raw ceramic bottom of the coffee mug.
Does it work?
It does. In a pinch. I didn't feel like getting up again. You just have to hold the angle that the blade is. That's not like great, but it works when you don't want to get back up from the table and there's already a coffee mug sitting there.
But then...
And a good crunchy bit.
That was good sauerkraut.
Oh, that was sauerkraut? Holy cow.
It is sour.
Mm-hmm. The longer it sits, the more sour it gets. I almost said sourer.
I mean, wouldn't be wrong, would it?
No. I expected the roast to kind of fall apart more than it did. It's a little bit more like pork chop in texture, but still good. Good morning. So dinner last night was very good, and our canned goat was in the cool down process during dinner. So these have cooled completely overnight and all the jars have sealed, which is awesome. I did forget to put vinegar in my canning water, and there was like the tiniest bit of siphoning, and because of that the jars are kind of oily and sticky, and so I'm just washing them up this morning. You can you could even submerge these if you needed to, but you can put these under warm-ish water and soap scrub them, and that's how I'm going to clean them. A lot of people will also use white vinegar, but I like to put them under, you know, water with soap. See, just like new, and then these are going to go in the dishwasher. Pantry does a little bit of cycling throughout the year. I've got some cans up there as well. There's a lot fewer canned goods on our shelf this year because our garden didn't perform as well as we had hoped. Thankfully, we do still have a lot of things canned up and we've got plenty to get through. I'm just really rooting for this garden year to be a good one, especially with things like tomatoes. Anywho, today is another cold, cruddy day outside, and I do have another activity plan that we're going to put on tomorrow's video. So I'm going to end this one here and I'll see you over there. We're getting very, very close to Christmas. I hope you all are doing well.